And in Las Vegas, I have 4 for a public comment at the beginning. The first is Barry Gold.
Good morning. My name is Barry Gold. I'm the Director of Government Relations for AARP Nevada. AARP Nevada, on behalf of our 300,000 plus members across the state, appreciates the efforts of the Bureau of Consumer Protection and the parties to mitigate the impact of the rate case, the Nevada Power rate case for residential ratepayers, and urges the Commission to vote for the stipulation which would result in no rate increase for residential ratepayers, and urge you to vote for that stipulation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gold. Mr. Fazio?
Angel Fazio. I read through the stip and I think it's extremely fair. We've discussed it with most of the people down here. It's amazing that what the original numbers were came down to a reasonable figure. We're hoping that even though it's a partial party stip, at this point the Commission accepts it, rather than having everybody go back to square one. We feel it's fair. This is not something I normally say, but I think NV Energy acted in good faith and taking the hit of millions down the road. And so the ratepayers are hoping that you will accept it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fazio. Mike Hazard?
Mike Hazard, Las Vegas. I also want to encourage the Commission to accept the stipulation as written. I think it's a fair deal for the ratepayers, and I support the stipulation. I oppose the opposition that's been registered, and so I hope that you will remember the ratepayers in this case and vote for the stipulation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hazard. And Joyce Hazard?
Good morning. I'm here also just to say that to support the stipulation. We encourage you to do that because it represents all of the people that live here in Nevada, and I think maybe in the north, I'm not sure. But anyway, that's a lot of people that are going to be affected if you know, for some reason the stipulation doesn't go through. So we just urge you to do that and not increase the rates for the ratepayers. And we thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hazard. Anybody else in Las Vegas? All right, let's go forward to item 2A. Item 2A is mine. It's docket 14-04024. It's a joint application of Nevada Power Company doing business as Nevada Energy and Sierra Pacific to approve amendments to its energy supply plan to reflect participation in the energy imbalance market. We went to hearing on this, had about a day of hearing, heard some expert testimony from the company, the Cal ISO, the Bureau of Consumer Protection, and the regulatory operations staff. What you have before you is an order that would grant participation in the energy imbalance market with several reporting requirements. I do have a couple of changes I want to put out there right at the very beginning. In the, let's see, I think on page, I had to find it here, should have marked it. What I have for the reporting requirements has a discussion with regard to, it's on page 46, paragraph 130. And will also affect the ordering paragraphs on page 49. It's actually two separate things. Starting on what they said is, however, the Commission finds that Nevada Energy is required to provide status updates or reports as appropriate in IRP and ESP updates. I would end that sentence, and then instead of using the word accordingly on the next sentence, that would be crossed out, and the words in addition, comma, would be added. So it's essentially two things. They would provide status updates and reports in the appropriate IRPs or IRP and ESP updates. And then in addition, they have these kind of quarterly reporting requirements, as set forth in the next compliance. So that would affect the ordering paragraphs on page 49 under compliance, so that number 2 would probably actually become number 3, and then we have a number 2, which would basically mirror the language on page 1, on paragraph 130, and state, Nevada Energy shall provide status updates and reports as appropriate in IRPs and IRP and ESP updates. There are some significant reporting requirements, and also acknowledgement that we expect the company to continue to monitor its resource plan as required by the regulations. So if we get to a point where the net benefits don't exceed the cost, then they need to bring it back to us so we can retool this. But given the outside potential for Nevada ratepayers, the investment here I think is well worth the risk. And I am here to answer any questions or respond to any comments.
Chairman, I just wanted to note that I'll be recusing myself from the vote on this as a result of my sitting on the transitional committee for the EIM and my obligation under the charter for that to support EIM, but I can offer my opinion that I think it's a good order. I have to be positive, right?
I actually, just a clarification then with regards to paragraph 130. So there's, in the IRPs, IRP updates, or IRP amendments and ESP updates, there'll be status reports and status updates. And then in addition to those, just as they become available, quarterly reports and these other status updates and other reports will be filed as they become available? Correct. Okay, all right. And that's all I have.
Okay. Right, then I would move that we grant the joint application as modified by the order and issue the order.
Second.
Actually, Chairman, it should be as modified today.
Oh, sorry. Let's start again. I move to grant the joint application as modified by the order and as modified today and issue the order.
Second.
All right, 2B is brought to us by Commissioner Noble.
Item 2B is docket number 14-05004 as the application of Nevada Power Company doing business as MV Energy for authority to increase its annual revenue requirement for general rates charged to all classes of electric customers and for relief properly related thereto. And is also docket number 14-05005, which is the petition of Sierra Pacific Power Company doing business as MV Energy for cost recovery for the Advanced Service Delivery Project and Nevada Dynamic Pricing Trial pursuant to the order issued in docket numbers 13-06003 and 13-06004. The hearings began yesterday, and there was a presentation of the stipulation that has been provided. There has been a bit of a fluid process since then. The FEA filed its signatory page consistent with SNWA and CRC not opposing the stipulation but not necessarily agreeing with it. At the end of the day yesterday, Howard Hughes filed a notice of withdrawal. This morning we received a revised stipulation that removed paragraph 18, which was the subject of discussion yesterday as part of a motion to strike filed by Bonanza, and notice of opposition filed by Ovation. With that revised stipulation, Ovation is now is a signatory, and Bonanza has filed a notice of withdrawal. So we have a revised stipulation before you and signed by all the parties in one form or another except for 3 parties, and those include Switch, Wal Mart, and Kroger. During yesterday's hearing on the stipulation, I asked the parties if they had any questions of a representative of the signatories for the stipulation with regards to cost of capital, and there were none. I then asked if there was going to be any questions, similar questions with regards to the revenue requirement provisions of the stipulation. And there were none, so I tentatively canceled the revenue requirement hearing. I kept the rate design hearing still on the calendar. That's scheduled for September 24th. Yesterday, because of the desires of the non-signatory parties to present rate design positions counter to the stipulation. At least some of those issues have been resolved, the best that I can see with regards to, as a result of the revised stipulation and withdrawal of Bonanza and the signing of the revised stipulation by Ovation. But that still leaves us with a partial party stipulation. I'm not today proposing that we accept the stipulation. What I'm asking for is guidance with regards to process. Because it's not signed by all the signatories, I believe that as part of due process rights, we need to provide those non-signing parties an opportunity to provide evidence counter to the stipulation for commission consideration. And that, at this point, it will only be with regards to rate design, which is scheduled for September 24th. So I am, if it is the desire of a majority of the commission today to just reject the stipulation outright because it is because it is a partial party stipulation, I'd rather know that now so that we can start over. My recommendation, though, is to move forward with the rate design portion of the hearing to allow Kroger, Wal Mart, and Switch to provide their testimony, and that testimony will be filed on September 10th. And after that testimony has been filed, we'll hold a hearing with regards to that testimony. I'll also ask the signatories to present a witness in support of the rate design portion of the revised stipulation. And then I would anticipate bringing a proposed order on the revised stipulation, as well as the evidence presented by those three remaining non-signatories to an agenda after that September 24th agenda for commission consideration. So at this point, I'm asking for guidance from the two of you.
Mr. Rankin?
Thank you, Chairman. I just want to clarify, looking at our notice, unless we offer guidance that we don't think we should move forward with this, we're essentially taking no action. And General Counsel may want to weigh in. I just want to make sure that whatever we do today is consistent with our notice. But I think based on Commissioner Noble's representation, I'm supportive moving forward with what he laid out.
And Commissioner Wagner, you're correct. The discussion today was going to be limited to discussion only. While we were noticed to possibly take action, I think the intent was just to limit it to discussion at this point, but we tried to be over-inclusive just in case it was going to be an actual recommendation or motion by the Commissioner.
Yeah. The only motion that I would have made would be to reject it, but I'm not making that motion today.
Well, I sat in the hearing yesterday, and we had a room full of very interesting interests, and I think that given what we heard yesterday, that we still have three outstanding parties that based on the discussion yesterday, anticipate coming forward with some redesign testimony on September 10th and hearing on September 24th. Procedural due process, I think, and we have to move forward with the hearing on that date. So I support your recommendation.
All right, thank you.
Item 2B is also brought to us by Commissioner Noble. I'm sorry, 2C.
Item 2C is docket 14-01024. That is the show cause proceeding to determine why Valley Electric Association Incorporated should not be assessed an administrative fine for constructing a new 5.3-mile, 138 kV transmission line and associated facilities prior to obtaining commission approval required by the 1963 agreement entered into between Nevada Power Company and VEA's predecessor, the Amargosa Valley Cooperative Incorporated, as adopted by the Commission in its order dated August 18, 1964, regarding CPC 524-1. You have before you a proposed order that recommends fining VEA $90,000, but holding the majority of it in abeyance, but still fining them $25,000. And I'd be happy to entertain any questions or comments you might have.
Any questions or comments?
I do, Chairman, thank you. Commissioner Noble, can you maybe put a little more color around how you arrived at 25,000 and then holding 70 in abeyance? I just don't, I don't know where, if there was some magical calculation or what your thought process was behind that.
Okay. Let me start with the 90,000. That spans, that's $1,000 per day from the start of construction till commission approval. And that was, I believe, effectively laid out by staff and recommending that we start with that number. And then I was looking, trying to see if there were other situations the commission has dealt with in the past that how the commission dealt with those. And if you look at page 25, footnote 9, it highlights two UEPA dockets, or two UEPA issues where facilities were constructed and the commission levied fines. One was against NL with regards to a 6-mile-long 230 kV transmission line. That was 6 years ago. The commission issued a $50,000 fine, required them to pay $25,000 immediately and held the other $25,000 in advance. And the second one was with regards to commencement of construction without a UEPA, and that was a fine of $20,000, although that was 12 years ago. And so I used those, while those were some time ago, I thought they were somewhat comparable, and that's what led me to the 25,000. I certainly wouldn't want to go below 25,000. This one was unique in that you had VEA come in, ask for commission approval, and then in my eyes, just blatantly went out and built it without commission approval. And in my review, the evidence was not forthcoming that it had actually constructed it. It took the hearing officer to flat out ask that question to even find out, and which I found disingenuous. So I thought the $70,000 in advance for 2 years would hopefully convince VEA not to do anything in violation of commission statutes and regulations between now and then, but I'd be more than happy to hear if you think that that fine amount is appropriate or not.
Thank you, that's helpful. I was just trying to figure out where the 25 came from. I guess I'll make an observation that I agree with your concern about how we ultimately found out about this, and I'm not particularly fond of the philosophy of begging for forgiveness rather than asking for permission. I think there was, grounds for asking for permission, and I think that we're a reasonable commission, so I don't understand where that disconnect happened. And I guess what I'm also concerned about is that in the last sentence, if there are no further violations of the 1963 agreement and the 1964 order, I think there's still some fundamental misunderstanding of what the term extension of facilities means. So, and also, it took our hearing officer flat out asking the question for us to find this out. So how would we ever find out if there are other violations? I recognize that Valley is trying to come forward and be a better, a regulatory citizen, a non-jurisdictional, somewhat jurisdictional regulatory citizen, but I'm still concerned. You know, I see the 70,000 as a nice hammer, but you know, I'm not 100% convinced that the fine shouldn't be higher. It definitely should not be lower. So that's just where my thoughts are and where I'm coming from on this.
Well, I agree with you, Commissioner Wagner. I think that one of the things that has just been sort of a surprise to me is that this argument that somehow construction doesn't count unless you've energized the line. And in our world, we know that that's maybe a legal argument, but certainly not. And I don't even think it's just, to me, I mean, you're right, we're a reasonable commission, but we expect people to provide us with reasonable information as well. And frankly, this fiction that's been trying to create that they can construct whatever they want, and it's sort of hands off until they actually energize it is ridiculous. I think that Valley has a misapprehension over this commission's jurisdiction. We issue them a certificate, and with that comes a whole host of obligations that they need to understand and realize and live up to. So I agree with you. I certainly don't think that fine should be any less.
I guess the question is, should it be more?
Commissioner Wagner, I'm fine. I can support Commissioner Noble's reasoning, and I think there's enough health and abeyance to actually focus Valley's attention on trying to make sure it maintains its regulatory obligations and tries to make sure it's a better regulatory citizen, frankly. So.
Wow, this is the unusual portion for me to want to go higher, but I think Commissioner Noble's basis is rational. I'm comfortable with the discussion that we had today, but I hope we're not embarrassed in the future by not being. I think we're being very kind, so I'll leave it at that.
You know, Valley is a membership cooperative, and so we don't really have sort of the same paradigm with ratepayers, and that can be punished because basically the ratepayers and the shareholders are the same people with Valley Electric. And what concerns me is those members and those ratepayers, and one of which I am of, didn't have any discussion or have any ability to make any decisions about this decision by management and the board of directors. And so I think the board of directors need to have a much better understanding of what their regulatory obligations are, because I've had at least one board of director come into on one of our agendas and explain to us we had no jurisdiction over them. And I think they need to familiarize themselves with the actual law that surrounds the Valley, the cooperative that they are responsible for, and the members that they're responsible for. That's all I have to say. Motion?
I would move that we accept the stipulation of procedural issues and issues of fact, approve the $95,000 fine, holding $70,000 in abeyance for 2 years from the effective date of the order, and issue the appropriate order.
Second?
Concur.
Items 3A and 3B are brought to us by General Counsel and can be voted on without any further discussion unless any commissioner wants to pull an item out for further consideration.
I have none.
No, thank you.
The only thing, and I don't necessarily need to pull it out, but it is item 3A. I think that the Bureau of Consumer Protection petition is very proactive action that they have taken. I think they raise an awful lot of really good questions and concerns. Ultimately, I'm concerned about the level of our jurisdiction to actually tackle those at this point in time. So given the jurisdictional concerns I have, I support General Counsel's briefing memo, but I do think that some of the issues and some of the concerns that Bureau of Consumer Protection has brought to our attention should certainly inform the actions of Southwest Gas. And frankly, Southwest Gas should kind of be glad that they brought them to us, because I think that we'll be seeing them in the future. So I do think that I appreciate the information brought to us by the Bureau of Consumer Protection, and I suspect Southwest Gas will too in the future. Thanks. I would move the commission accept the recommendation contained in General Counsel's briefing memos regarding items 3A and 3B and issue the appropriate orders.
Second?
Concur.
Items 4A, 5A, 6A, 6B, and 7A are brought to us by regulatory operations staff and can be voted on without further comment unless any commissioner wants to pull one out for further consideration.
No, thank you.
I have none.
Okay. I would move then that the commission accept the recommendations contained in staff's briefing memos regarding items 4A, 5A, 6A, 6B, and 7A and issue the appropriate orders.
Second?
Concur.
Item 8A is time for comments from the general public on any topic that is jurisdictional to the commission. Are there any members of the public wishing to make a statement in Carson City?
Yes, Mr. Volt?
Good morning. For the record, Fred Volt. Two different subjects will be commented on this morning. First, a recent open records request was submitted to commission staff. The nature of the request was to determine the number, type, and resolution of consumer complaints. It was surprising to learn that the commission staff neither maintains nor publicly presents cumulative records of such information on a monthly or quarterly basis, choosing to publicly tally and issue the information only once every 2 years. The timely compilation and publication of this information could be a key metric in gauging the effectiveness of commission policies and the customer service from and satisfaction with utility providers. Any enterprise in a non-governmental setting would be concerned with the number and nature of customer complaints on a more frequent basis than once every 2 years. It leads to the question of why aren't consumer complaints cumulatively tallied and reviewed more frequently in order to adequately represent the people paying for the PUCN's existence. The second issue concerns the Regulatory Operations Director's recent rate-making presentation at Las Vegas and Reno consumer sessions. While the effort was sincere, the actual information presented raises several concerns. Broad statements were made by the director and one of her attorneys about how this operation balances the interests of ratepayers and utility companies. However, there has been no initiative by the regulatory operations staff, who unfortunately lack business experience outside of the regulatory strictures of NRS and NAC, to establish reasonable rates of return for utilities given the dramatically lower rates of return for competing investments and asset classes. There is no competitive pressure from other utility providers in a monopoly market environment. And when a utility stock is not publicly traded, there is no pressure from the investment community. Why isn't regulatory operations conducting an analysis, given these paradigms, under today's complete range of investment conditions and alternatives before it endorses returns nearing 10%? Next, it is highly doubtful that regulatory operations, with its current staffing numbers and training, can conduct anything more than a spot check of claimed expenses by regulated utilities when they submit rate increase requests, despite the director's claims to the contrary. And the lack of private business experience again hampers a complete review of these same employees. The public also sees no initiative by regulatory operations toward either streamlining the rate-making process using industrial engineering techniques for simplification, or requiring methods improvements in the way regulated utilities conduct their businesses. With the almost complete lack of proprietary information in a monopoly utility setting, save purchased energy costs, it makes no public policy sense to hide from public view the questions asked by the relatively few parties permitted to participate. Finally, just how much chronicled by idea and dollars has the regulatory operations function saved ratepayers because of its involvement in rate making? Thank you.
That's all we have, Chairman.
And in Las Vegas? Mr. Fazio, did you have a card?
Angel Fazio. Ever since the consumer sessions last week, the ratepayers had gone outside to check to see if hell had frozen over. As NV Energy is now actually communicating with us And Tony Sanchez actually called me his friend. Granted, it was a choice between me and Mr. Derivative that day. I told him it's flex pay last week, and we had a phone conversation yesterday that the deposit structure is discriminatory, unfair, needs to be trashed and revised. As this deposit amount being predicated on prior customers' historical use is not fair. Not everyone has the same electronics or lifestyle. Only when you move into a new unit is there a single deposit amount of $100. So how can an apartment and a 4,000 square foot house justify the same amount? Not to forget that with flex pay, you have to pay for the internet, another financial burden. I told him I was not familiar with rate case protocol and didn't know if this could be done. But I asked him to look into taking it completely out of the rate case and request that a separate docket be opened. I realized that was incorporated in the stip, but right now the stip is basically in limbo. He's looking into it and will be arranging a meeting with myself, Tony, and Pat Egan about customer service issues. They are apparently either desperate enough to improve customer service ratings or they are sincere. Only time will tell. I told him really not to expect any increases in customer service ratings until possibly July, as we're going to see how they approach the legislature and getting statutes rather than PUC subject matter jurisdiction. I had also informed him that NVE and Buffett were very used to buying people, but now they can't buy the million-plus customers. It seems that the new management really wants change. I and the other ratepayers would like to see it, but we also will believe it when we see it. Tony graciously sent me the customer service plan. It's great corporate speak. I don't know about the implementation. On Sunday, I was told that an NVE customer service rep told the customer that they didn't need to have an actual home energy inspection visit, that they could do it over the phone. I sent Tony an immediate email about it. To his defense, he responded promptly, assured me that on Monday he would have one booked at her convenience. I checked. She was contacted by NVE for scheduling. So apparently they are taking some steps. Since the ratepayers are here talking about certain items ad nauseum for all parties concerned, I suggested that there needs to be a customer board, 3 from south, 2 from north, to meet and discuss issues with NVE that the BCP doesn't need to take on. They're already overworked. This should be interesting if they go forward. As Tony said, he will bring it up as to how to address this suggestion. As there was previously a board, I refused to include commercial accounts as they are not interested in the best interest of residential customers. The residential customers are willing to work with NVE to achieve equal fairness to all parties concerned. Also to allow NVE the opportunity to possibly increase their ratings based on new interactions and addressing the concern of ratepayers. We're going to take a wait-and-see approach, but we are a little leery that they are desperate. But based on last week. I actually think NVE is going to try to increase their ratings. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fazio. Anyone else in Las Vegas? We're adjourned.